Your petals may fall, you may wilt.
Annual crops tend to be the basis of most of our gardens. Crops such as potatoes, carrots, beets, lettuces, peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers. But annuals tend to need a little bit more work than, say, perennials do. Tasks like soil prep, seed starting, weeding, fertilizing, watering, and trellising are just some of the jobs that take a little bit more time with annuals than they do with perennials. Some of these jobs you won't even need to do each year if you're only growing perennial plants. Once planted and established, perennials take considerably less amount of time and effort to continuously care for them. For example, adding mulch to your perennial plants aids in suppressing weeds, so you don't have to do as much weeding, and it also helps the soil to retain more moisture. Therefore, you can spend less time watering your gardens. Since they have time to develop bigger and deeper root systems, perennial plants do require less fertilizer than our annual crops because those roots will go deeper into the soil and access nutrients that are there. Often the only thing that we do for some of our perennials is a yearly pruning. So if you are thinking about growing some food at home this year, but you're a little bit worried about not having enough time or energy after you do your full-time job, then this is the right video for you, since I have collected 6 perennial crops that are very easy for beginner gardeners to grow at home. The first is asparagus. Asparagus is one of the earliest crops that we actually get to harvest each year from our backyard. A great source of fiber, protein, iron, and vitamin C, asparagus is a relatively low-effort crop that can provide great nutritional value and shorten our hunger gap. Asparagus is a perennial crop that, given a little bit of patience, will produce for 30 or more years. To grow asparagus, most will prefer to grow from a bare root. That is a plant that has been grown by somebody else and is dug up out of the ground, has the dirt shaken off of its roots, and then is shipped to whoever is going to grow it. Now typically these are 1 to 2 year old plants, so they have the benefit of harvesting from their plants earlier. Now, if you start from seed, you will be waiting a little bit longer, 4 to 5 years before you're starting to harvest your asparagus springs. But that being said, starting from seed is definitely more affordable. To plant bare root asparagus, dig a shallow trench deep enough to bury the roots, but make sure the crown of the plants stay above the soil. After covering the roots with soil, mulch the plants with wood chips to protect them and help retain moisture. If you are starting from seed, plant your seeds inside in late winter, about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost. Fill a seed tray with a seed starting mix or your own homemade compost if you do that. Create a small divot in each cell and place 1 seed per cell. In my experience, asparagus seeds have had a really high germination rate, so I don't feel the need to plant multiple seeds in each seed cell because I know that they're going to have at least 1 seed come up in each cell. Ideally, you would provide a heat mat if you live in a colder climate such as ours here in Zone 5 in Ontario. It gets quite cold and we don't keep the house very warm. It's just warm enough to be comfortable, which is a little bit lower than what seeds will like to have to germinate. So a heat mat just helps to keep the soil that they are seeded into a little bit warmer and help to speed up the germination. It's not a necessity, but it does help to speed up germination. If you don't have one, just know that your seeds might take a little bit longer to germinate. If you are using a heat mat with a thermometer, set your heat mat to keep the soil around 20 degrees Celsius. After your last frost, transplant the seedlings into your chosen location. When starting from seed and transplanting into your garden, it's not necessary to dig a trench in your garden and then plant into the trench. You can simply prepare your soil, amend with some compost, and then create small holes for the transplant to be transplanted into. Once they're into the ground, firm the soil around each plant so that they won't get washed away. With these transplants, I tend to avoid mulching right away. I would prefer for the plants to establish a little bit more and develop thicker stems and taller plants, and then I know that I'm not going to accidentally break off one of the stalks. So if you're planting from seeds and you're wanting to mulch, wait until the fall. This will mean that you'll have to do some cultivation to maintain the weeds around those plants. I've planted our asparagus at roughly 2 feet between each plant. Each week you'll want to provide 2.5 to 5 centimeters or 1 to 2 inches of water. Then in the fall, cut everything back and mulch again to protect the crowns for the winter. Number 2 is rhubarb. Another great source of fiber, vitamin C, and calcium. Rhubarb is a long-living plant that provides an edible stem. This stem is used in a lot of different dishes, but my favorite is strawberry rhubarb pie. Rhubarb is one of the crops that I would prefer to start from a more mature plant grown at a nursery or one that's purchased from a garden center. Planting in the spring, dig a hole large enough to give a little bit of room around the pot that these plants will come in. Add finished compost to the hole, then add your rhubarb plant and backfill with a mixture of the native soil and more compost. Water well and mulch deeply to help that soil retain moisture. For the first season, since this is a large leafy plant, I would suggest that you add some balanced fertilizer every 2 to 3 weeks during the first season. Similar to asparagus, rhubarb will take a few years to establish before you are able to start harvesting. Number 3 is strawberries. There's few crops that are more synonymous with summer than strawberries. Growing these purely for the taste of fresh strawberries is completely acceptable, but they are also packed with nutrients like vitamin C. And on a weight basis, they do provide more vitamin C than our citrus fruits that we typically associate with having vitamin C. Just like asparagus, people do tend to prefer to plant bare root strawberry plants. But they can be started by seed with a little bit of patience and care. To start, strawberries need a cold stratification period to help them germinate. Put a couple packs of strawberry seeds into your fridge for 4 weeks. The seeds are very small and don't have a high germination rate, so place 2 to 3 seeds per cell in your seed trays. Provide bottom heat, maintaining the soil at 20 degrees Celsius, and provide a humidity dome to keep the soil moist. Between 7 and 42 days later, you will have little strawberry sprouts. Keep them under bright lights until after your last frost and plant them into your gardens. Opting for bare roots or plants from a garden center, simply prep the soil with lots of compost, plant the strawberries so that the crown of the plant is above the soil line, and plant your strawberry plants about 60 centimeters or 2 feet apart. Once planted, Don't forget to mulch, and with these ones it's really easy to remember what type of mulch you should use. It's right in their name. Use straw. Alright, welcome back from that brief intermission. My camera battery died, and so I had to charge it up. And it is currently the next day, but we're going to get through this video now. So the next crop that beginner gardeners should try to grow that is perennial is raspberries. Now there are many varieties of raspberries, so choose the variety that you prefer to eat. Of course, there are the traditional red raspberries, but there are also golden or yellow raspberries, and there are black raspberries. Raspberries are referred to by many people as the most delicious weed. So when you are deciding on where to plant these plants, make sure you choose carefully, as if left unattended, they will run away on you. Raspberries are also a crop that you likely won't start from seed, so purchasing plants from a garden center or a nursery or ordering them online is going to be your best route. After you have a location selected in your garden for these plants, amend the soil with plenty of compost. Then you can dig holes that are big enough to fit the pot of raspberries in, and then plant away. Plant your plants roughly 1 meter or 3 feet away from each other. Raspberries will appreciate soil that stays relatively moist but not waterlogged. So that compost helps to retain a lot of moisture, but don't forget to add a good layer of mulch to help retain a little bit more, especially in the hot summer heat. The next easy perennial crop for beginners to grow are walking onions, sometimes called Egyptian walking onions. These alliums are harvested for the green onions. Rather than planting seed, these will come in bulbils. Plant them in well-draining soil, amended again with compost. The plant spacing for these walking onions should be about 15 centimeters. What's that, you say? Onions aren't perennial? I thought you might have caught on to that. Each year, these walking onions grow a set of bulbules on top of a long stalk. Once the bulbules get to a certain size and weigh down that stalk, the stalk will fall over onto the ground and the bulbules will root into the ground. So technically they aren't a perennial crop, but if you collect the bulbils or you just leave the onions to grow unattended, they will come back year after year, or you can replant them year after year. So not perennial in nature, but you can get future harvests and planting done after planting these just once. And the last crop here is another false perennial, that is garlic. In the same family as the walking onions, garlic is a member of the alliums. To grow garlic, prepare your location in the fall with lots of compost. Garlic cloves are planted in the fall prior to hard frost setting in. Plant the cloves 2 to 4 times deeper than the height, likely between 10 and 15 centimeters, and allow for 15 centimeters between each plant. In our area, we only plant hardneck garlic, particularly a variety of garlic called music. Hardneck varieties of garlic produce a edible flower stalk. This is called a scape. So growing hardneck garlic in our area allows us to get kind of 2 harvests of garlic, an early harvest of the scapes, and then a month to 6 weeks later, we dig up the bulbs. Once you have dug up the bulbs and let them cured, you can save the largest cloves from each bulb to replant in the fall so that you can have another harvest next year. So you get multiple plantings and harvests after growing one crop of garlic. So there we go. There are 5 easy perennial crops for beginner gardeners to grow in 2024. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please plant the like button, cultivate the subscribe, and harvest that bell. Your support of this channel is also supporting my community gardening and food security program, where I help people to grow and produce food at home. All of that work I do is done for free, so I'm hoping to get monetized through this channel and this platform on YouTube to fund the project further. I hope that you did enjoy this, and I will see you all in the next video very soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Don't matter if you don't know. He'll push through all of your love. Your petals may fall, you may wilt, but don't you know how strongly